Good morning. I'll call to order the regular meeting of our Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is November 12th, 2015. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee, and we have a quorum with Council Members Reich, Andrew Johnson, and Council President Johnson. We have 13 items on today's agenda. We will return to the public hearings in just a moment, but I'll start with the consent items, which are items 4 through 12. So item number 4 is a landmark designation for the Spokesman Recorder Building at 3744 4th Avenue South. Item number 5 is a landmark designation for the Anson Brooks Mansion at 2445 Park Avenue South. Is that correct? Yes. Item number 6 is a rezoning at 1313 Chestnut Avenue, adding an industrial living overlay district to an existing light industrial district to allow for the addition of an indoor theater and updating our code to reflect that change. Item number 7 is approval of the Loring Park rezoning study. I will pull that for a brief. We have a change from what the Planning Commission recommended. So maybe I'll just read the change from what the Planning Commission recommended now and just briefly comment on that. So with the rezoning study, this would be approving the rezoning studies, including adopting the staff findings, approving the zoning map amendment, which includes the Basilica properties remaining OR3. The change is that St. Mark's property would so I'm needing to move an amendment here. Okay, you know what? I'm going to pull item number 7. We'll just return to that one briefly in a moment. Okay. Item number 8 is Weber Park Library vacations, approving an application by the county to vacate an alley, and additional approvals related to that excellent project for the Weber Park Library. Item number 9 is rezonings for the library. And then item number 10 is referring to staff and ordinance related to snow storage, authored by Councilmember Reich. Item number 11 is referring to staff and ordinance related to fence regulations regarding the materials of fencing. And item number 12 is referring to staff updating the Linden Hills zoning overlay district following their small area plan. So I will move items 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Is there any discussion? Council President.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will just speak on the Weber Park Weber Park Library item. And I just want to thank the county for a really good process, communication with the community in a number of forums, chose an excellent architect who has the community's support and buy-in and excitement about this beautiful library that's going to be built in the Camden community. So we're very much looking forward to it. And again, it has been a process that has involved hundreds and hundreds of residents filled with excitement. So we're really looking forward to it. This will be a lovely addition to Victory Memorial Drive. Take advantage of a beautiful site in the Camden community, and we're very excited. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to the county for such an excellent job. I don't think I've ever had such a well-received project at the Planning Commission in my time serving on the Planning Commission. Folks were really excited about it. So on the motion to approve the consent items, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay, and those carry. So we'll just return then now to item number 7. I don't think we need a staff presentation on this, but I'll just be more clear in my motion here. So we had at the Planning Commission the rezoning study from Loring Park. There is one change to what we had approved at Planning Commission that I will move, which is under item number 2, to retain the zoning at the St. Mark's property as OR2. So that is a change to item number 2. And I think the justification there, one of the planning commissioners had thought that the property for St. Mark should match the zoning for the Basilica, but really I think it makes more sense for the zoning to match the surrounding area of the zones. So St. Mark's is in an area that is zoned mostly OR2. I don't think the church has any plans that would be prohibited by having an OR2 zoning there. So then I will move item number 7, which is approving the Loring Park rezoning study and adopting staff findings, approving the zoning map amendment, keeping the zoning of the Basilica properties OR3, having the zoning of the St. Mark's property be OR2, returning directing staff to return to the Planning Commission for recommendations related to Phase 2, which is looking at the zoning along Nicollet Avenue within 12 months, and to reopen the small area plan guidance related to the built form. Now that the zoning has been taken on, to look back at the built form map to make sure that it still makes sense within the context of what the zoning recommendations have become. And then number 3 is updating the code in accordance with those changes. So any discussion on item number 7? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. All right. Now we'll return to the public hearings. Item number 1 is related to parking area variance appeal, and we will start with staff, and that's at 3515 Second Avenue staff.
Good morning, Chair Bender, committee members. I'm Janelle Woodmeyer, the staff person assigned to this project. At this property, a renovation of an existing building to establish 12 dwelling units is underway. The site is zoned R5. And just to give you some context for the site and the surrounding area, the property to the north is a single family dwelling. To the south, we have an apartment building. This is a primarily residential area, and as demonstrated by the adjacent uses, it's a mix of residential uses as well. And then to the west, we have Interstate 35W. As I mentioned, a renovation is underway of the existing building. This is what it looked like before, facing Second Avenue, and currently the work that they're doing is as illustrated in the bottom photo there. But the appeal that's before you is regarding a parking area that's proposed to be added to the site. Along the south side of the building, the applicant would like to add 4 parking spaces. And then to access those parking spaces, they'd be doing the shared driveway. These spaces would be in addition to 5 spaces that are existing off of the alley. But to allow the 4 spaces on the one side of the building, they need 3 variances. The first would be to reduce the minimum drive aisle requirement from 12 feet to 11.5 feet, and that's for a one-way drive aisle. The second is to reduce the setback requirement from the parking to the habitable space in the building itself. They want to go down to 0 feet. Normally 6 feet separation is required. And then lastly, they need to, or are requesting the variance to reduce the minimum side yard requirement adjacent to the south lot line from 5 feet to 0 feet to allow the parking area. The Board of Adjustment denied each of the 3 variance requests. They adopted the staff recommendation at a vote of 5 to 4. The original applicant is appealing this decision. Their reasons for the appeal are included in your packet. So I'm going to go through the findings and just hit on the main points. Starting with the first finding and looking at practical difficulty, we did note that there is a shortage of on-street parking in this area. Second Avenue is a one-way street. There's parking only on one side. The applicant also brought up the fact that this is a snow emergency route, which can contribute to parking issues as well. However, this property, being a multi-family residence, located within a quarter mile of a transit stop that has frequent service at the midday, has no minimum parking requirement. So they do have parking on site, those 5 spaces that I mentioned at the rear of the building. So by adding more parking that needs this variance, they're essentially creating the need for the variances. So it was not found that practical difficulties exist for this property or that there were any unique circumstances. And it was also found that the request did not be reasonable or in keeping with the spirit and intent of the ordinance or comprehensive plan. The purpose, of course, of the drive aisle requirement is to ensure that you have adequate room for maneuvering. And for the separation between the parking spaces in the building and the yard requirements, those are, of course, required to allow adequate separation between uses. Several concerns were brought up with these requests. First of all, there would be impacts to the ground level, the garden level unit in the building. So you can see along the south side here, the applicant is proposing to do some glass block windows and having parking right up against that part of the building. The concern is that that's the reason for the glass block windows, and that they're having less access to light and views from that garden level. The second level spaces would also be impacted. They'd be directly looking out onto the parking area. And with this, the the reductions to the yard and the spacing requirements, there wouldn't be any room to have any landscaping or screening in there. Lastly, we just noted that, again, by paving more area of the site, then you have less area for snow storage, and that was a concern as well. And going back to the minimum parking requirement, the fact that they don't have a minimum parking requirement doesn't mean, of course, that they can't provide any parking on the site. That was noted. But the purpose of that reduction for the transit incentive, of course, is to allow for more flexibility in redeveloping sites, promoting efficient use of land, and reducing reliance on automobiles. So by not having parking on the site, the parking variances for this request would not be needed if they didn't provide more parking. Lastly, looking at the impact on surrounding uses, what's proposed for the site, rehabbing the property, that's expected to have a very positive effect. This building has been vacant for quite some time. The property to the south, we noted, has a very similar parking configuration where they have parking up against the building. And as I mentioned, they're sharing the driveway. But these ordinances that we have are considering variances of were established to prevent situations like this. And when you're looking at the broader scope of paving more land area for parking, it does detract from the residential character of the area. So just to reiterate, the findings for each of the variance requests were not met, so the board did deny each of the requests. That concludes my presentation. I can take questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question would be, what is the width of that? I see the length at 87 feet 9 inches, but what's the width for those parking spaces?
They're each 8.5 feet wide,
Okay.
so that's the minimum width requirement.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Council President?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So how does a car park in that? Does it park with its light? Are they parked to the long side?
They're parallel parking spaces, so
Okay.
they would have to pull in and maneuver
I
like
see.
you would on
Okay.
an on-street parking space.
Okay. And then the glass block windows, is that a unit that does it have additional windows or does it, so when I'm looking at the elevations, then the glass block window is blocking what? Or what's the living space behind the glass block window?
So the garden level dwelling unit that would be adjacent to the south side of the property extends approximately to the middle of the building. So these are windows that would be filled with glass block. And then if you look on the front, it's this unit here. So they do have open windows facing the front.
I see. Okay.
But not all rooms would have the open
Okay.
windows.
And there's just one of those units?
Just one, yeah. The space back here, I believe, was for laundry storage,
Okay.
more utilitarian purposes.
Okay. Thank you. And what's the existing parking complement in this building, although it hasn't been occupied for a while? Where do people park now, and what was the existing conditions?
The existing conditions are, they just had that parking area in the back for the 5 spaces. And the last legal occupancy that's recognized is a nursing home. And so their parking requirement was different.
Oh.
So, and that was years ago, so I don't have any more information about exactly how it was used or what parking demands there were.
So this was used as a different kind of building?
Correct.
See. Thank you.
How many units are in the building?
They're proposing to establish 12.
12 units, okay. And then, I'm sorry, just so I'm very clear, could you point out again the living space window that would be blocked by parking, and then which windows are not living space?
Yes, I think it'll help if I pull up the floor plan. So here is, it's not showing up. Okay, here's the ground level. There we go. So the dwelling unit goes back to here. So 1, 2, 3 windows, I believe. Yeah, these windows here.
And then just to be clear on the existing condition, the building that would be most immediately adjacent to this parking area seems to also have the same parking arrangement. So it doesn't seem, I just wanted to be clear that there's no argument that is there an argument about negative impact on the adjacent property?
It doesn't seem like the impact would be substantial, given that they already have vehicles for their tenants parking there. You can't really see it in this picture, but their parking area is just off to the side there.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. We'll start with the applicant and then invite anyone else who would like to speak on this item to come up after that. So would the applicant please come on up? We'll have everyone state your name and address for the record and then go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, board members. I'm Rob Lubenow, owner of the building. I live at 3432 24th Avenue South. We recently acquired this building in May and immediately began the redesign process and demolition and construction. And at that time, prior to the no parking requirement ordinance passing, we were actually applying for a variance to reduce our parking. So throughout the whole process, we've been working with Janelle. This is how we purchased the property from an absentee owner. And then immediately we started beginning construction and demolition to bring it back to the original character, getting rid of the mansard roof and kind of the ugly of the building. At this point, actually, windows just started going in yesterday, brick cleaning, tuck pointing, and whatnot. So it is coming back to life. All the neighbors are very happy that it's finally being taken care of. Speaking to her question about kind of what the neighbor situation is, so you can see here, this is where we're applying for parking spaces. And then as you go down from the street side, coming down the private drive, this is kind of shows better how the neighbors immediate to our south park on that lot, and we're asking to do the same on our side. The other point that we'd like to bring up is that it is very impactful as far as what's required for parking and where you can park on the site, both in the summer and during the winter. So I would guess with the only exclusion being downtown Minneapolis, this is probably the most restrictive for snow emergency routes in Minneapolis. So it starts from across the street, Nicollet, 1st Avenue, Stevens Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, Portland Avenue are all snow emergencies, and then also both 35th and 36th Street are. In addition to that, in front of our building, sometimes you can find a space. Most of the time you cannot find a space to park, as the off-ramp only allows for parking on one side. In addition, at the end of our block, there's also no parking along the block on the north. So I guess we feel that there is an opportunity to park on site, something that is already in the neighborhood directly to the south of us. In addition to that, when we went through the redesign process, we're actually coming back to an apartment building. It was built as a 9 to 10 unit apartment building. And then it went through a bunch of changes, being a nursing home, boarding house, and just kind of a hazy, unclear idea what it was. So coming back to an apartment building, we actually have to bring it to current standards. So we have the entire first floor accessible, handicap accessible. So all the units are type A or type B units. And in addition to that, we also want to have parking that would accommodate people that traditionally need to park closer to the building, given some limitations. So in the rear of the building, we do have our one handicapped specific parking with the handicap accessible to it. In addition to that, the parking on the side would help alleviate some of the impact for parking within the building. We do have 12 units, and there would be 9 spots if we could get parking alongside the building. And just to address a few of the points, and I know you guys had questions about some of the information in the packet. So first is the snow. We are working with the properties just south of us to alleviate the snow. So all their snow already goes off-site. So, and we're working with them with the same company to take, again, the snow off-site. The point where it's the pervious and impervious surface, we're actually having, with this change and with our site improvements, there's going to be less pervious space. Correct, less pervious space. So these are already all paved. Around the building is all paved. And we do see evidence of previous parking on the side of the building, although in 1980 there was a ramp put up to access the first level, or I'm sorry, the second level of the building. So the pervious space would be reduced. So leaving more green space. I guess the other point to that is going with the previous board. They had a hard time with the adoption of the new ordinances, kind of understanding what they can do with, adding parking where it makes sense when there's traditionally not the hardship created now with being so close to the bus route and having a zero need for parking. So they kind of felt it did make sense, although they didn't feel it was the venue to approve the variances as such because, traditionally, is it a hardship or not? So that I think there's some kind of contention there from the previous board. The last thing is the support. I know there's a few people here today speak in support. We have approval of every property owner immediately adjacent that wants the parking, knowing that there is such an impact for parking, both on our street and neighboring streets, and from what goes into more single-family homes versus our street. I think it's 6 of the 10 are multifamily on Second, and with a majority of those being 8 units or more. So there is very limited parking already. So they are very cautious and want to make sure that we can do whatever we can to kind of free up some parking spaces. We do have the formal approval of the local neighborhood group. There was, previous to this, the petition that the local residents signed. I think there was 18 members there. Alondra Cano is very supportive in what we're doing, although obviously not a formal support. The local neighbors are also very interested if there is parking going to be added. And then the last point, I know there was questions about, this is a design decision about making glass blocks along that wall. So we had it through the entire level to be more continuous because some of these spaces are storage and laundry rooms. So for security, you wanted to make sure that it's the most secure, not just a glass window in between the 2 spaces, and we kept that going through that whole side. This is a fully sprinkled building, so there is no requirement to have operable windows, and there's actually fresh air brought into every unit continually. And then in the open space of the 1 unit affected with the glass block, there is the operable in the same room as what they have.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
First of all, it was a beautiful renovation, so congratulations.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Well,
How much space is there to drive in between the 2 parking area spaces? And I could ask that of staff as well.
So again, the actual going by how much is required.
So like how, I just want to make sure
11.
it's safe for somebody to park. So people are going to have to parallel park. So is there enough space to drive in there and then back into the space?
We do that currently. So our site vans, the workers there currently park alongside the building when they're offloading material and whatnot. So yes, there is adequate room to parallel park. The building to the south is nearly always occupied with cars, and I myself have parallel parked. I think it is closing the gap 6 inches. I think 12 is required, and 11'6", 11'5" is what we have.
We can also ask staff as well.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Okay, we're good. Thank you. All right, so then we'll allow anyone else who would like to speak on this item, just come on up, state your name and address for the record. We'll have our clock going, so ask you to try to stay to 2 minutes. We do have a very full agenda today, but we want everyone to be able to say what they came to say.
My name is David Peters, and I am the owner of 3516 3rd, which is the house. You can see in the picture there, if you see the garage at the end of the parking area there, that's my garage. And I just wanted to speak because I am strongly in favor of the parking variance, because I think in that neighborhood, parking is a big issue. And I think that the fact that there is available spots there to be utilized will help with the parking congestion significantly, since they're adding a 12 unit. And there's definitely, I've driven through there many times, and I mean, I can't speak to it technically. I never got a tape measure out, but I've always felt that there's more than adequate space driving through there with vehicles parked on, their construction vehicles on the one side and all the cars parked on the other side. And I think that because the other building to the south already has the same parking, I don't think it really takes away from the aesthetics of the area. I just think that, first of all, I think what they're doing with the building is incredible, because that building has been, basically a dilapidated building for 10 years. And I think it just really makes sense in the neighborhood to have that extra parking. I guess that's about all I have to say. I don't really have any other points to add that they haven't already mentioned.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Please come on up and state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Timothy Garcia, and I live kitty corner back behind the alley on 3523rd. A lot of the people in the neighborhood were kind of glad that we've seen somebody come in and do something with the building. It's been abandoned. Last 5 years, we've seen it. You walk to SA with your kids, we don't like seeing dirty needles on the floor, on the ground. Since they've started construction, you don't see that anymore. You don't see the illegal dumping. A lot of the people in the neighborhood that I've talked to that our children play together, we don't understand. Like we say, well, the building next to it, it's the same style. Why they're not allowing the parking to be for the building next door? When there's adequate parking, there's adequate way to get in between them. It is just, we're glad to see that the building, something is being done with the building as far as building. The previous owners, when you see them and you tell them, hey, you got a lot of junk, you got people getting in your building, you didn't care. Now you got people that care in the neighborhood. We don't, with us having kids and it's in the school area, we'd like it to see the building be done. We'd like to see them get their parking. So it's adequate parking. When you walk, you don't want to see the people that are trying to get in there at night that we've chased away. We've come in and we see them at night, hey, somebody's trying to get in that building, and you chase them away. Then you walk through there the next day, you see needle. But ever since the construction started, you don't see any of that anymore. And a lot of people in the neighborhood that we talk to, neighbors of mine that live in the area, we think it's a good idea for them to get their parking because it'll be adequate to the building next door. The people in the building next door, majority of them are Somalians that I've talked to. They've said the same thing. Why they don't let you guys have the parking? It'll keep people from, something's being done with the building, so it keeps it a lot more quieter in that area when you're coming through there. So it's just kind of one of the deals where a lot of people in the neighborhood, they see it, and we're glad that something has been being done with the building. We'd like to see them get their parking to be parked there because it's adequate parking when the building next to it is identical. So there'll be no trouble as far as going through there. As far as traffic, we go through there a lot of times. 2nd Avenue is a one-way. It's a snow emergency route, so it's going to be, when you have snow, you can't park the snow emergency just to give them adequate parking for over there. But we're glad, a lot of the people in the neighborhood that we talk to, they're glad to see that something is being done with the building, and we'd like to see them get their parking permit and see the building get done. It'll cut a lot of the trouble that hangs around abandoned buildings that usually accompany abandoned buildings. But we'd like to see them get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this item? Would anyone else like to speak? Last call. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing on this item. I would like to ask staff that question about the space of the drive aisle. I see that that was part of why the staff originally recommended denial of the variance application, was related to the amount of space, as I understand it, to maneuver in there. So I just
Right, the minimum drive aisle width is 12 feet, and they're at 11 and a half feet proposed, and I don't know if it would be useful, but between the building and the shared property line, there's a little under 14 feet, and it's pretty much the same on the adjacent property. So that shared driveway goes pretty much right over the property line.
Any other questions for staff? Is there a motion? Council President?
Madam Chair, I would move to approve the variance and direct staff to provide findings. All
Okay.
variances, the 3.
Thank you. Council President has moved approval of the variances, application, appeal. Is there any discussion? I'll just comment that I would count this as a success story of our parking reform because it allowed the property owner to determine how much parking could fit on the site and what the market is kind of needing in the area. I have concerns about filling up every usable square inch of a site with parking. So in this situation, I think given the surrounding uses, the small amount of space that's being asked for the variance related to having a adequate drive aisle, it seems to me that the findings would be able to be met in this case. So I'll be supporting this motion. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll support this motion as well and concur with my colleagues. And I guess my one kind of thought to you would be for that garden level unit to consider, now with this variance, I expect to pass, to consider perhaps not having one parking spot there in front of those glass brick windows, just because I think it's going to obviously impact rent to have somebody constantly pulling in and parking in that spot. And I think it'd be nice for whoever lives there if they didn't have that, and seeing shadows of the car pulling in and backing up and hearing it as loudly. So just something to consider.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. With that, we'll move on to item number 2, which is a floor area ratio variance appeal for 113 East 26th Street. And we will start with staff.
Good morning, council members. This is an appeal of an application that was heard before the Planning Commission on October 5th of this year. This is for the 26th and Stevens apartment development. At the Planning Commission meeting, there were